I begin today with a story, one that is told in many ways from many different Native traditions. Once there was a woman. From sunrise to sunset, she could be found near the entrance of the cave in which she lived. There she would sit, weaving intricate patterns into beautiful garments, the way her ancestors before her had done. Her only companion in the cave was an old crow, and periodically throughout the day, the woman would get up from her loom to stir the pot of stew simmering over the fire at the back of the cave. One day, when she returned from stirring the pot and tending the fire, she found that the crow had pecked the garment on her loom and pulled the threads, undoing her work. She gazes at the mess, wondering what to do. From within the messy tangle of threads, she sees a pattern emerge, a new pattern, not like the one she had been working on. She sits down at her loom, picks up her threads, and begins weaving the new pattern. Within this ancient story are three lessons that are essential for ministry for times such as these, a time when we, and you've heard me say this before, but I'm going to say it again, it's a time when we, and by we I mean everyone alive on the planet today, are continuing to emerge from a disruption unlike any the world has seen since the Second World War. For churches, synagogues, and spiritual communities of all kinds, congregational life as we knew it got disrupted and pulled apart. It can feel like we have lost the way forward when the pull to return to the past is strong, and yet the way leads on. The story suggests three tasks for ministry in times such as these, when we are just beginning to put the pieces back together. The tasks are these: tend the fire, stir the pot, weave things together. And I'll say more about these three tasks, but first I want to say a little bit about ministry. Ministry, in its broadest sense, is all that we do together in service of our shared mission. Also, ministry is a time-honored vocation, a calling of the Spirit to serve divine and holy purposes. In my 22 years of ordained ministry, I have witnessed two shifts in how Unitarian Universalists think about ministry. When I first entered the ministry as a profession, a phrase I often heard was that ours was a learned ministry. And in recent years, there's been a shift in language from the learned ministry to the learning ministry. The shift from the past tense learned to the present tense learning more accurately reflects what Unitarian Universalists hold to be true, that revelation is not sealed, that new insight, new knowledge, new awareness is always breaking into our awareness. There is always more learning to do. The second shift is what I have seen as a broader acceptance of the concept of shared ministry, something this congregation has fully embraced. And it's a recognition that while the ordained minister occupies a particular role and office, the ministry is carried out in partnership with the congregation and with ordained ministers, that the responsibility for the health, well-being, and vitality of the congregation is shared. Everyone has a part to play. Living in a pandemic-changed world as we do, when life is, shall we say, a little more complicated, when the church is called to provide ministry in new, creative, and innovative ways to a world of people in ever greater need of love and care. Ministry in times such as these asks an openness to new learning and an openness to sharing both the joys and the burdens of a congregation's ministry. With these two understandings in mind of a learning ministry and a shared ministry, let's turn our attention to those three essential tasks for ministry in times such as these. The first task is to tend the fire. We are people of the fire, a flaming chalice, a cup of community filled with the fire of commitment. In these times when burnout is rampant among religious professionals, lay leaders, and faithful volunteers, it is important to remember that that same fire that warms and lights our way can flame out and burn out. We tend the fire by fueling it with Unitarian Universalist principles and values of interconnection and individuality, caring for the whole and caring for each person who makes up the whole, balancing the work that must be done with the need for rest and play. We tend the fire by living our principles here within the congregation and in our daily lives. The second task for times such as these is to stir the pot. And judging from the laughter, I would guess that's one of your favorites. To stir the pot is to keep learning about ourselves and the world, to keep adding new knowledge, new insights, and new experiences to the stew. The presence of our Unitarian Universalist, liberal and liberating values is needed now more than ever. Ministry in times such as these call us to stir the pot by making good trouble, as the late Representative John Lewis would say. Keep making good trouble in the world. And to do this faithfully requires each of us to stir the pot of our own mind. We live at a time that calls each of us to do the work of examining our own unconsciously held bias and prejudice, the work of liberating ourselves from habits that perpetuate oppression. In Gandhi's example, being the change we wish to see in the world. Which brings me to the third task. The third task is to weave things together. Weaving a new pattern is an act of faith. Faith as it is talked about in the Christian scriptures, the assurance of things hoped for, and conviction of things unseen. It's placing trust in the emerging pattern to be beautiful, but different than what existed before. Still beautiful and possibly stronger and more sustainable, more fitted to times such as these. Now, this does not mean abandoning the past, but taking up the enduring threads of the past and weaving them together in new patterns, threads which have always formed the fabric of our living tradition: love and compassion, justice and mercy, generosity and commitment, freedom and interdependence, acceptance of each other, and covenant. Times such as these are an opportunity to make some intentional choices. Which threads do we pick up and carry forward? What patterns do we let go in order to let new patterns emerge? In addition to the changes COVID has wrought, in this country, we are undergoing significant generational change. According to Pew Research, the population of Generation X, those who are in their 40s and 50s, is smaller than the baby boom generation, those around the ages of 60 to 80, by about 70%. So Gen X is smaller than the baby boom generation by about 70%. So if we put this in simple terms, it is impossible for Gen X folks to step into all the roles and positions that baby boomers have filled. There just aren't enough of them. So if you're among Gen X, my heart is with you. Millennials, those in their 20s and 30s, recently surpassed the baby boom generation in numbers. The world the millennial generation was born into, came of age in, and now face as young adults is vastly different from what baby boomers and Gen Xers experienced. So millennials, my heart is with you too. Can I get an amen? I'm being a baby boomer here because I lost my place on my technological device. So, this millennial generation has the significant numbers and the critical mass to sustain our religious institutions, yet their numbers among us are small. It's not that they are any less spiritual or religious. It's just that they get their needs for community and meaning-making met in different ways, often because the traditional patterns of doing church simply don't fit with the realities of their lives. And I think every generation knows something of existential angst and anxiety. It's like on steroids for millennials. I'm thinking of the woman sitting near the entrance of her cave, looking out into an unknown future and picking up the threads of her tattered tapestry. And I wonder who it was that taught her to weave, how to hold the threads and the loom, how to work with them together. And I wonder what vision she was seeing for weaving that new pattern that was just emerging, how she envisioned weaving that into her tapestry. I believe there is great value in our Unitarian Universalist heritage. There is richness in our history and beauty in the ways we form our deepest values and then live from them. The greatest strength of our tradition may be its willingness and ability to adapt, change, and evolve with the times while holding fast to what is enduring, the thread of love that holds us together in each new generation. While the pattern may change, that thread of love remains. It remains the same. If you, like me, believe that this faith is worth handing on to the next generations, here is my charge. And for some of you, it may be a challenge. If you have been carrying an important thread of congregational life, or if you have been one who tends the fire and stirs the pot, if there are tasks that you have been carrying out to keep this church and its mission alive, consider who it is that you might mentor and teach them what you do. Or, on the other end of that, if you're wondering how things get done around here or how you can contribute, consider who it is that might mentor and teach you. Know that together that you will be shaping the future patterns of the church. To accomplish this, I have a further charge for you, and this may be the more challenging one. During social hour, talk to someone you do not know. If your usual pattern is to catch up with your friends during social hour, and you find yourself falling into this pattern, be a good friend and remind each other that your charge is to talk to someone you do not know. It just may be the beginning of a mentoring relationship, and it may not. Either way, you will have made a new connection. After all, the fabric of community is made up of relationships woven together into a tapestry of faith. Notice what happens when we add a comma to the phrase, weave things together. It becomes an expression of shared ministry, to weave things, comma, together. As Susan Frederick Gray, the outgoing president of the Unitarian Universalist Association, often says, "This is no time to go it alone." We tend the fire, stir the pot, and weave things together. The fabric of community, the fabric of belonging is a communal project. It takes all hands working together. So are you committed to talking to someone you do not know? I see head nods. I see some tentativeness. But a new day is dawning in our pandemic-changed world, and it begins with you. That it may be a day of promise and hope, Together, may we tend the fire of our Unitarian Universalist faith. May we continue to stir the pot by stirring the spirit of our faith, and may we weave a stronger and ever more inclusive tapestry of faith. May it be so today and for all the days to come. Amen, and blessed be.